Yeah, author and mathematician Bobby Seagull joins us this morning. It's interesting, isn't it? Because there are so many distractions now. There are so many apps on the telly, spooling through social media. To pick up a book and stick with it feels harder and harder.
Yes, and I would think the world is now sort of complicated. There's so many things going on, so many demands on our attention that I think making the time for yourself to sit and read a book actually could be that bit of me moment, a time where you get to sort of reflect and get a break from the world. So I think reading has that really positive mental health effect where you're not just, worried about the day-to-day all the time.
How do you stop all those other thoughts coming in, though, when you sit? Because that's what happens to me. I open, I get a couple of pages in, and then I pick up the phone, or I go and get the kids, or, something will pull me away from the book.
I think it's challenging, but I think it's a skill set. Like anything, the more you practice... Again, I teach students in school, and now they're in half-term. Hopefully some of you are reading now, my students. But with them, if they struggle with, let's say, with reading a book, I'll say just read for 5 minutes or 2 minutes, and then slowly build up that muscle, that reading muscle, I would say.
And that's what this weekend push is all about, is it? It's trying to sort of gently get people back into it. Like we were saying, it's a bit like a sort of couch to 5K, but for books.
It really is. So the reading agency have got this new scheme called the Road to Reading. And what they want people to do is, over the course of 10 weeks, is commit to just 30 minutes in a week of reading. And hopefully that's going to start a great habit for people.
Because you never regret reading a book. I finished one last month that took me more than 3 months to plough through because it was dense, it was hard to get through. But at the end, I felt really satisfied.
Yeah, and I think almost like a workout with Joe Wicks. Joe Wicks always says, once you've done a workout, you never regret it. And I think the same thing with reading. When people read it, they feel uplifted, you feel more connected to the world, empathetic. So I think reading... I think the more people read, the more we're better human beings.
Wow.
Do you know, if I read and I don't really enjoy it, I get to the end and I'm disappointed, but I feel really disappointed. I feel really sort of angry that I've devoted that much time to it and it's not paid off.
But that's the risk of anything. Sometimes you go for a workout
That's true.
and maybe, your whatever you're working out has not been quite as good. So I think it's like there'll be some books that you love, some that you don't. But I think that's the process of reading.
Yeah.
You've still built on your reading, on your literary experience, haven't you? Even if you haven't enjoyed it.
Yeah, I guess so. And I suppose, you have to put it down to experience. It's also the speed. I wonder whether I'm as quick reading as I used to be, because I just sort of scroll through, as Nina was saying. You get used to short bursts and little articles rather than, the full thing. I
would say reading shouldn't be considered a competition. So I'm part of a couple of book clubs, and there we've got like a monthly target to read a particular book. But I would say the whole point of reading is to get yourself away from the world, a bit of escapism. So again, it could be 5 minutes before bed, it could be on your commute, and it can even be an audiobook. And audiobooks, we were having a discussion before, audiobooks are fine as well.
And short stories are great, aren't they, for our current way of living?
Absolutely. So in fact, the reading agency have got these books called quick reads, so really short books. They can get through maybe like an hour or 2 hours. So it's just building that habit. Because again, when people sometimes see like a 300-page tome, they're like, I can't get through that possibly. But just start building the habit.
It's also finding your book, isn't it? When you fall out of the habit and you try and get back into it, and like John's experience, it's one that doesn't quite work for you. You might sort of set the bar too high, something that's really complicated, or if it's too low, it's too simple and it's not challenging you enough. It's finding the right book to get you back into the groove, isn't it?
It is, and what people will find is there's such a community of readers online that you can always get suggestions like, oh, I enjoyed book X, so people make suggestions, but also you can reread books that you've loved from your childhood or from your teen years. So that's always an acceptable and great way to get back into the habit.
Well, I'll tell you what, we asked our viewers this morning for some suggestions, and lots of them have done exactly that. Lots of people talking about getting back into reading by reading the stuff that they read when they were younger, like Tracy's in London. Morning, Tracy. She said it was the famous five that got her reading when she was younger. The adventures they went on, she still reads every night.
Oh. I'm with Sarah from Cornwall. The book she loves most is Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe. I've read it so many times since I was a child. All the stories in the series are amazing and transport you to another world. Those ones that capture your imagination as a kid are priceless, aren't they?
Because they always stay with you. It's almost like people's music habits and adulthood are formed as children. I think our reading habits can be formed as well.
I can still picture that wardrobe.
Yeah, jump into it, get the cloak on.
Paul says his introduction to reading was Just William, Billy Bunter, Enid Blyton, all from a certain era there, Paul. But what kick-started his real love affair with reading was when he picked up voluntarily My Family and Other Animals by Gerald Durrell. That's a classic, isn't it? That's a lovely story,
And Ray says his eyes were open to literature when he read Goodbye to All That by Robert Graves for his English language studies back in the 1970s. And that's it, isn't it? Sometimes it can happen through education at school in a sort of official channel, but it can happen when you least expect it. What would you say to someone who says, I am not a reader, I've never been a reader, I never will be?
So what I would say with this Road to Reading challenge, log on to worldbooknight.org and you can sign up for a challenge. 10 weeks, 30 minutes a week. That could literally be 5 minutes a night, but it's making that first step. Often people, when they've got this big insurmountable goal, they're like, oh, it's far too far away. But small baby steps, and eventually they can hopefully be confident readers.
And when you're using that bit of your brain, the rest of your brain has a little rest, doesn't it, I find, when I'm reading a good book.
Unless your phone's... Put your phone out of the way.
Put your phone out of the way,
maybe.
chuck it under the table and do some reading. Get a cup of tea, some biscuits.
Lock the kids in a cupboard. Thank you, Bobby.
That sounds like another wardrobe, maybe, in keeping with the Lion and the Witch.